Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with actually a request. This was a request by a longtime subscriber of mine, good friend of mine, of Death Metal Elitist. Which I know I've said I'm not taking requests for a while because I have so many box sets or marathons I want to get to. I still want to squeeze more Batman stuff in. But, once in a while, because without you guys, I don't really have a channel. I have to remember that. And if it's something I have, it's something I really enjoy, then why not? And he requested, actually, one of my favorite horror films of the 2000 to 2009 decade. And that is 2008's The Strangers. I know this is a love it or hate it kind of film. I absolutely love it. There are things in this film that has not been done, at least well, since, Halloween, 1978, Just Before Dawn, 1981. I mean, very rarely do you get the way some things are handled in this film. Of course, it stars Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman. It says inspired by true events. Now, I'm not saying this to be condescending, but, so there's a difference between inspired and based on. Inspired mean like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, there's not a cannibalistic chainsaw-wielding family in Texas that Tobe Hooper got that story from. It was actually a grave robber in Wisconsin in the 50s who murdered 2 people, but did do a lot of stuff with body parts. Anyhow, based on is when, okay, it's, enough of the facts are there, the characters are the people. This is basically sort of, I guess it's been stated, based on the Manson Tate murders and also the Ketty Cabin murders in 1981 in Ketty, California. Even though writer and director Brian Bertino has never cited that California cabin murder as an influence, but he has stated that there was the neighborhood he grew up in had some home invasions like this. And, it's a very, very stripped down, simple film, but very effective. And there are 2 films that I think of that have come out since then that I think, well, one came out before this, but that I think of, wow, this is not only a better version of both of those, but put those 2 together, this is still better than what that would be. Obviously, The Purge, and eventually Hostel. The Purge was okay for what it was, kind of disappointing. Hostel, very overrated. It's just edgy and hardcore, as some people like to think. No offense if you like it. If you like it, that's great. I thought it was disappointing as hell. Because it was just a douchebag sex comedy with a little bit of torture throughout. The Strangers. Yes, it's a slow burn. I mean, the unrated film is an hour 28. The R-rated is an hour 26. So, barely an hour and a half each. But at times, you do feel those minutes, but as the film goes on, you know where that patience went. Because, well, first off, you might think you're in trouble, because I always forget this before going into it. It opens up with, a caption pretty much saying, like, even the text and even the voice has the whole, like, the film me what you are about to see. It's like that John Larroquette Texas Chainsaw Massacre opening. And it wouldn't make me think that was intentional had Scott Speedman's character's last name been Hoyt, which is Leatherface's family's last name in the 2003 remake. Which I liked that remake, but to me that's when to me that's when remakes start with that one. When people talk about remakes, I think about that one forward. But so we follow Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler. Actually, I got to back up even further. Once we get the non-Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference, we see two boys on their bicycles. There's a car that is burnt up and smoking. They go inside this house with the doors open. There's blood everywhere. We hear the 911 call of one of the boys saying there's blood everywhere. I don't know where we are. I don't know what street we're on. The strangers. So Scott Speedman plays James Hoyt, and Liv Tyler plays Kristen McKay. And yeah, the way the film plays that makes it sound like on this night, 2005, Kristen McKay and James Hoyt returned home from a wedding. This happened between 4 a.m. and whatever time later. The events of what happened that night are still not entirely known. It pretty much tells us what happens. That is the one complaint I would say. There are times where it is predictable. And yeah, they pretty much did show us the ending in the very beginning. Because it's like, if we're buying that this is true, and it's not entirely known, that means no one lived to speak about it. So we know everyone's gonna die. But, so Tyler and Speedman, they're a couple. They're on their way home from a wedding, or at least his parents' house or their vacation home. They're silent. Her makeup's running. Things seem tense, like they've been arguing. They get back to the house, which also we see a ring box in the beginning when it shows us the not ending. I know it sounds like I'm ripping on this film, but this is one of my favorite horror films of that decade. So we get the idea, and it even shows us through flashback that he proposed and she said no. So now it's awkward. He calls a friend to come pick him up, trying to make light of the situation. They get a knock at the door. It's this blonde woman. You can't see her face. She's in shadow. She asks if someone is there. They say, no, you have the wrong house. She says, are you sure? He says, yeah. She stares at him and then walks off. And then eventually he leaves to go buy her some more cigarettes. The knocking becomes more erratic and more often. The first time it is, she asked for the same person she asked for before. She says, you've already come here. She says, are you sure? Almost kind of like robotic repetition. And I was reading something. Oh, and this was made on a $9 million budget, which I believe. Some of the best horror movies are made on those tiny-ass budgets. Not all tiny budget horror movies are masterpieces. You have, like, Sinister, which was made for like $2 or $3 million, and look what that made. Or Devil Inside. This made 82.4, so it was a sizable hit. And I know a sequel was in development hell forever, just came out in 2018. I still have to see that. Strangers Pray at Night. But this is when the film really picks up, when he leaves to go get cigarettes and she's left home alone. Because you get the iconic scene, which is the original poster, which is my favorite scene of the whole film. Sorry about that glare. You know, when she's actually standing in the kitchen when this happens, and the guy with the mask is standing behind her. He's out of focus. There's no music. There's no real attention drawn to him. And that, to me, is pure horror. To me, the fact that, you know, that is suspense, that is horror, because it's suspense because the audience knows the character's in trouble for that reason. But the character doesn't know she's in trouble for that reason. But we do. Suspense. Horror. It's a fucking guy in a mask. In a house that she did not let him in. No, I love that scene so much. It reminds me of, like, Halloween, when Annie and Laurie are on the phone with each other. Annie's walking around the kitchen. You'll just see Michael in the background through the kitchen window, just standing there. Cuts to Laurie, cuts back to Annie. He's gone. Or when Laurie thinks she's killed Michael, and you do get a bit of music during this part, but like he sits up and the dun dun dun. You can have tense, creepy ass moments without loud music stings and shaky cam and the camera like bringing attention to something. Which I will say, during that scene, when she's in the kitchen and the guy's watching her, the camera does kind of feel like it's this handheld, kind of awkward, like it's not found footage, but like it feels like the camera's getting more uneasy the longer he stands there. Then it kind of steadies itself. I don't know if that was on purpose. I like to think it was, but I think I just noticed that this time. When there is a score, which is done by, it's actually done by Tom and Andy, who did the Hills Have Eyes remake. Wonderful wonderful score. I actually had the soundtrack to that somewhere. You know, where Hills Have Eyes was more of like that. This one is just more of a ominous sound, darkly ambient, which I also enjoy. But you know, I love the fact that there are those scenes where, you know, like It, the new Stephen King's It. That movie was all jump scares. Any newer supernatural film, all jump scares. You don't have to have jump scares. You can have creepy moments with the threat at bay, just being creepy and out of focus. And, you know, they leave hints, like the smoke alarm was going off and she undid it and it fell on the floor. When she looks down, it's actually on a chair. Like, the movie it's just a long, methodical, psychological game that this guy with the sack over his head, with the eye slits and the smile, kind of, and then the two girls that have like the sort of purge masks, but more like older, classical looking, called Dollface and Pinup Girl. One's blonde, one's brunette. And, you know, they're totally silent. We don't really get a lot of shots of them. You know, they're always doing something. Every move they make is sort of like a meticulous chess move. Like, there's really only one scene we get where it looks like kind of candid, I guess, which would be when Liv Tyler is watching the guy walk back into the house, or when she's in the pantry looking through the blinds and he kind of sits at the table and walks around. You know, every other time we see them, it's to serve a purpose. But I love the psychological game they play, like, you know, the fact that they write hello on the bedroom window, but it's from the inside and they haven't seen him in there yet. Or something like we've seen in the French film Inside, which came out a year before this, which I'm actually, oh wait. You know, the friend Scott Speedman called in the beginning, he shows up, and, you know, they're held up in the bedroom. He has a shotgun. As soon as he walks into sight, he shoots him. You know, he shot the last hope he had of help. And then, you know, they find the word killer written on the window. Like, it's just this methodical mind fuck. Was that, that's another thing I should make a video about. The difference between mind fuck and just fucked up. I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook. Most mind fucky movies. Human Centipede, August Underground, Serbian film. No, that's fucked up. Mind fuck is like Eraserhead, Jacob's Ladder, In the Mouth of Madness. Ones that just makes your head go like, not necessarily trippy, but like ones that make you think and twist. And so yeah, I guess I contradicted myself because this isn't really one of those films, but the game that the strangers are playing with our main characters, the mind games they're playing with them, is very interesting. And this came out at a time where the torture porn, even though I hate that label, was, you know, at its highest. You know, like, Saw 5 was out at that time. I think Hostel 2, I think it was either 2008 or 9. You had that shitty-ass Touristas. I think Captivity was out then. But, you know, the torture porn, I guess, was on its way out, and paranormal was coming in. But for a movie like this to come out at that time, which isn't really that bloody. I mean, it's got enough blood at the end, but it's not a blood show. It's not gory. I mean, eventually we see that, I guess once they've had their fun, they just take Tyler and Speedman into the living room, tied to a chair, and they pretty much just take their masks off, but we don't get to see them. I do like the line Liv Tyler asks, like, why are you doing this to us? And the blonde one says, you know, because you were home. Which is really the most, like, sociopathic thing someone could have said at that time. It's like, if you weren't home, we wouldn't have to do this to you. We'd be doing it to someone else. But you were home. You know, it's not their fault, it's your fault. So, you know, that put an even more sinister twist on it that I enjoyed. And then they just slowly stab one to death so the other one can watch. And of course the jump scare at the end was the boys on their bicycles are these, I'm guessing, altar boys, or someone to do with the church. They're passing out pamphlets for Christian living. They stop their truck. The blonde girl gets out, asks if she can have one. Are you a sinner? Long pause. She's like, sometimes. He gives her one. And then we get the opening of the film. They find their way to the house. They find Liv Tyler. And when he kneels down to touch her, see if she's still alive, she grabs his hand and screams. So, you know, they got us with the Hollywood jump scare at the end. But, you know, I always enjoyed this film. And I never understood the hatred that... Yeah, I know people either love or hate it. And that's fine. If you dislike this film, that's absolutely cool. I'm guessing it's because it's not... You know, I buy this. For people who are held up in a invader situation, I buy this as more realistic than the entire motel sequence in Devil's Rejects. I do. One, I think Devil's Rejects is entirely overrated to begin with. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. I feel like, especially the motel sequence, is trying way too hard to get under your skin and create the sickest of people that he can. This movie is subtle. It is, you know, sure, a lot of things are convenient and things work out in the stranger's favor. It's a movie. It's gonna happen. But when you really look at it, I buy this as more... If someone's gonna be in a group that's gonna terrorize for the sake of terrorizing, it would be more like this. Even their behavior, like, why are you doing this? Because you're home. You know, psychopaths never see what they do is wrong. It's always someone else's problem. Or sociopaths, however you want to use it. But, yeah, I always bought this sort of invader situation more so than Devil's Rejects. And I think that's why a lot of people might not like this film as much, because it doesn't go there, where it is so subtle on body count or kills, body count and kills, the blood and gore, you know, the moments that really make you kind of, you know, really trying to be sick and edgy and twisted and disturbing and hardcore, you know, that gets every hateful, like, 14-year-old, like, yeah, that's edgy. It's not like that. It's subtle but effective. And that's why I like this movie more, and movies of this ilk even more. I've always loved this film. I always have. You know, I love its low-key budget, its low-key music, lack of jump scares. You know, you could say Liv Tyler's not the best actress. Maybe they don't have the best chemistry, but they're not supposed to have chemistry. There's supposed to be, you know, tension between the two. Like, they're arguing. And, you know, and, you know, I guess with Brian Bertino's main inspiration, I checked up on it. When he was a kid, he was home alone. And these people were knocking on doors, asking for someone who didn't live there. And they later found out that if no one answered, they would break in. So this kind of puts a twist on it, making it like a purpose invasion. But this, to me, is sort of like the Blair Witch Project of home invasion films. Or not even home invasion, any kind of invasion. Even like the motel sequence in Devil's Rejects. Because it's so low-key. It is very subdued. but the moments it has are very, very effective. I mean, the one scene that's on the poster with him just walking, like, just peering out of the hallway while Liv Tyler's in the kitchen, way creepier and scarier and more effective and suspenseful than most of, like, the really hardcore films of this time. But I think this is about to kick me off for in a second. This is going on a bit too long, but Death Metal Elitist, I hope you like this review. I'll try to get more requests if I get them. I got a lot of box sets and marathons and Batman stuff to get to, but I feel bad if I keep saying no. But The Strangers, one of my absolute favorite horror films of the 2000s. Or, I know people only call movies they like horror. People don't like this. They call it psychological thriller. It's a fucking horror movie, but I always loved this film. Strangers, it's subtle, subdued, it's effective, it's awesome. I love it. Thank you for watching.